rules for using Zoom today. So I'm sure you've seen these all before. We're all getting used to this now, but please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. This helps reduce background noise. We're going to record this session. I think you've already all been alerted to that, and the session will be posted on YouTube. If you have a technical issue, post it on chat, and we will try and assist. But if the host has a problem, and I'm presuming that's Rebecca is as the host, or is it maybe it's Rosemary?
Rosemary, or yeah,
Rosemary. But please stay in the meeting if we all disappear for some particular reason, and we'll try and join again as quickly as possible. We have got a time for question and answers at the end of the session. However, I would encourage you all to put questions in the chat function at any time during my short presentation and the videos that you'll see. We will try and answer those questions as we go along, but if they're a bit more complicated, we'll probably leave them to the question and answer session at the end.
We're exchanging comments.
So I think I can hear some chat going on. And please raise your hand to ask a question in the question and answer session at the end. Thank you very much. So by way of introduction, I'm Sarah Holmes. I'm the Housing Register and Development Manager at Tunbridge Wells Borough Council. And today, though, I'm in the role of, I am the chair of the Kent Strategy and Enabling Group, which is part of the Kent Housing Group. So responsible for the group who have rewritten, refreshed the Rural Housing Protocol. We have Tessa O'Sullivan, who's the Rural and Community Housing Manager at Action for Communities in Rural Kent. Some of you may know Tessa already. Rebecca Smith is the Kent Housing Group Partnership Manager, and she's responsible for the screens and everything today, so thank you very much, Rebecca. Alison Thompson is Deputy Development Director at English Rural Housing Association, a major player in rural housing in Kent. I'm not sure about Liz, whether she's actually arrived or not, because she wasn't here before, but Liz Crockford.
Here, Sarah.
Oh, you are fantastic. Thanks, Liz. Nice to see you. She's a Housing Enabling Officer at Sevenoaks District Council and helped us refresh this protocol. And the only person who isn't here in person, but we're about to play a video of her, is Baroness Warwick. She's the chair of the National Housing Federation and was kind enough to write a foreword for us, which you will have seen at the front of the protocol. And we're going to play that foreword now.
Delivering high-quality, affordable homes is now more important than ever. We're charting a new path through a challenging landscape. We mustn't lose sight of the need to meet the demand for affordable rural housing. And I want to highlight its importance both in the county of Kent and Medway and nationwide. The impact of the coronavirus has seen a shift in how households and businesses evolve, and we'll undoubtedly see an even greater need for affordable rural housing. It's critical that we work in partnership to ensure we build a mix of homes with different tenures that meet a range of needs if we're to create sustainable and balanced communities. Our lifestyles need to change and adapt in the future, and that must be reflected in the design of new homes, ensuring that affordable rural homes benefit spans of the Kent Council's flexibility with access to appropriate and necessary infrastructure. In achieving this, we'll need to rely on the expertise of our partners and the sharing of good practice. The expanse of the Kent countryside offers great opportunities, from the enjoyment of open green spaces to employment. For example, over 40% of the business sector in Kent is based in our rural areas. These factors will ensure that those who wish to invest in a rural community within Kent and Medway will be able to prosper and thrive. The Kent Housing Group is a housing forum with a broad church of membership organisations, each one of which has a clear understanding of the vision and desire to maintain and increase rural housing supply. It has a long and successful history of bringing organisations together, aligning opinion and support to ensure that housing in Medway and Kent is successful in meeting housing need. Through this partnership, over the last decade, Kent and Medway has seen a sustained and successful number of rural housing developments. The delivery of high-quality housing can have a big impact on the health and well-being of residents, both mentally and physically. A balanced and thriving community of essential networks and connections can help to reduce rural isolation. Kent Housing Group wants to share its ambition to build more affordable rural homes across the county. To do this, it's recently reviewed and substantially upgraded its guide to developing affordable homes in rural communities. The guide offers advice and information relevant to a broad audience and is split into useful fact sheets that deliver everything a partner would need to get involved. It delivers what it says on the tin. It's intended to support those already living in our rural areas who are concerned about the lack of affordable housing in their own local communities. Only by working with these local rural communities and groups will it be possible to provide successful and sustainable future housing schemes that meet local housing need. All partners of Kent Housing Group, including local authorities, registered housing providers, parish councils and the voluntary sector, are encouraged to promote and reference the newly revised guide. I was approached by Kent Housing Group to provide a foreword for the guide, and I readily agreed. So on behalf of the National Housing Federation, I'm very pleased to support this excellent initiative, and I encourage all those who have an interest in affordable rural housing to promote and use this guide on every possible occasion. Thank you.
Okay, so you've heard from the Baroness, and now you're gonna hear from me. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today. We were absolutely overwhelmed with the number of people who registered for the event, and it just shows the breadth of people who are interested in this subject, this very important subject. We've got parish councillors, we've got local authority officers, we've got KCC councillors as well. There are also a lot of people on there who just had an email address, so I'm afraid I didn't know what they did, but I'm sure it's just amazing how many people are interested in the rural housing protocol, and thank you so much for coming. Just a little bit about the development of the protocol. It is a refresh. It is a document that's been available before through Kent Housing Group. Kent Housing Group is is a unique organisation, really, bringing all 13 local authorities across Kent together. And Rebecca, as the manager of that partnership, does a sterling job in keeping us all together. And Kent Strategy and Enabling Group is a subgroup of Kent Housing Group, and because it's the type of work we do, we're housing enablers, most of us who sit on that group, from local authorities across Kent, and occasionally a housing association comes too. We're in a unique position to refresh the protocol and have a look at that, and I just wanted to thank everybody who's been involved in developing it again. So Kent is a very rural community, as you know, as I'm sure you're all aware, and that we've had a lot of success in Kent developing local needs housing. And as you can see in the guide, approximately 900 homes across the county secured for local people. However, we do want to do more, and we feel that by refreshing the protocol and drawing everyone's attention to it today, particularly having a launch event as well, will refresh it in people's minds and hopefully go on to develop many, many more local homes for people across Kent. There is a need to do a lot more. Action for Communities in Rural Kent have carried out surveys from April 2014 to March 2019, showing a further need of 825 homes across our Kent parishes. So an average of 13 in every small community. So if we can do anything towards meeting that need, then it's a good thing. So next slide, Rebecca. So the protocol, as the Baroness said, is divided into different fact sheets, and we hope that by doing it this way, whatever stage of the journey you as an organisation or an individual are at, can either start from the beginning if you've don't really know much about affordable housing and want to know how to go about it right from the start, or whether you're a parish council who has a landowner in your parish who wishes to use their land for affordable housing. Hopefully you won't need to start from the beginning, and you'll be able to look for that particular section in the guide. So I'm not going to go through all of the fact sheets, but I'm just going to give you a little flavour of some of the things in there. Rural housing, the whole process of developing rural housing can seem very complicated and daunting. And it's also a very long journey. The schemes I've ever been involved in have taken years. However, that long journey is always worth it, because to see somebody moving into a new rural home through a housing association is just incredible, and I know how important this type of housing is. So first of all, we start to describe what affordable housing is. There's a lot of terminology in this sector. For example, the difference between social and affordable rent is described, and that's you may or may not know the difference between the two, but that's described in it, and also about the different types of low-cost home ownership. We then go on to describe how affordable housing is built. You may or may not know that most affordable housing is delivered through Section 106 agreements or market housing sites. So a developer has to provide a proportion of their homes as affordable housing. The difference really in the rural areas is you might still have this, but you tend to have very few units developed. Oh, sorry, I've started to get feedback if I'm hesitating a bit. I don't know why that is. Anyway, it seems to have stopped. So, but the other methods are rural exception homes, where there's a piece of land on the edge of a village normally, which it would not normally be granted planning permission, but will do for affordable housing for local people. And that's called a rural exception site. And there's now also increasingly the use of co-ops and community-led housing. That's also described in the guide. And we're lucky to have Tessa from Action for Communities in Rural Kent, who leads on that type of housing now. And we have a Kent housing hub for community-led homes. Next slide, please, Rebecca. We go on to also talk a little bit about the allocation of affordable housing for the rural areas and local authority waiting lists. Again, you may or may not know that people in housing need can apply to their local authority for affordable housing, for social housing, which is either provided by the local authority directly or otherwise through housing associations or registered providers, as they're now called. Little bit different normally for rural communities. If you do have people who are in need of housing in your areas, then I would encourage you to for them to apply to the local authority waiting list. Occasionally they might not be in as high housing need as some of the others who are homeless, for example, on the waiting list, but very often where a rural housing scheme is developed, it can go to somebody lower down the list who has that local connection, because both things become important when housing is developed in a rural area. You have to have a housing need, but you also have to have a local connection to that village or settlement or parish. Applying for shared ownership housing is a little bit different. It's done through the Help to Buy agent rather than local authority. But again, if you have people in your areas who are interested in that, there's a link in the protocol to where they need to apply to. It's not so strict in terms of housing need, and certainly the capital limits for shared ownership housing are higher, but you do obviously still need to have a small deposit to enter that type of market. When the housing needs surveys are carried out, we often see quite a few people who are interested in shared ownership housing. Tessa at Action for Communities in Rural Kent normally does a nice analysis of whether those people actually could afford to do shared ownership housing. There's fact sheets. I don't actually think they're 5 and 6. I think I got that wrong, but they're practical issues of how to initiate and develop a scheme. This looks at an individual who might have a piece of land that they might want to use for rural housing. It also talks about housing associations and how they can use their expertise to develop housing in rural areas. And also further on, there's the part about financing and the capital grants available. I think this may need updating a little bit because we have a new affordable housing programme 2021 to 26, and that's through Homes England. So this is for capital grant to assist in bringing forward schemes in the rural areas or anywhere, but the Homes England have recently said that with the new affordable housing programme, they are putting aside 10% of the grants for housing in rural areas. Unfortunately, the capital grants are not going to cover all of it, and that's where the housing associations come in. And normally it's a housing association developing the site, either alongside a private developer, or if it's a rural exception site, normally on their own. In terms of the financing, that's done through loans that the housing association has with the banks, and that's been quite a bone of contention, because often it means that they may be the higher affordable rent. Sometimes there's also funds available from the local authorities. They may have Section 106 commuted sums from other sites where they haven't been able to have affordable housing. They may be able to help in terms of topping up with capital grants that way. Then following on from that, at the end of the guide is a glossary of all these terms and also frequently asked questions. So hopefully that will help you if you have a particular question to ask. as I say, the protocol has been refreshed to try and meet need. Done very well in Kent, but there's more to do, and that's shown through these housing needs surveys. And we're hoping that by refreshing the protocol and putting it out there today, that we can generate more interest in rural housing and also promote the sharing of good practice between ourselves. The next slide, Rebecca. So this is a short video of a resident moving into an English rural housing scheme. Yeah, as I say, the best bit about rural housing is seeing the people move in, normally many years after the scheme was initially concepted. But yeah, what a difference it can do to people's lives.
Living here has changed our lives by giving us affordable security and peace of mind in a lovely rural village.
It's changed my life because my son now has his own room and we now have a garden that we can just walk out into from the kitchen.
As a single mum, living in affordable housing has made it possible for me to work and live in a safe, lovely area, and gives me the peace of mind for a secure upbringing for my children.
Having an English rural home has given me a peace of mind, ultimately with no more worry over extortionate rents. It's provided me and my daughter with a quality of life where we can afford more opportunities. It's also provided us with a sense of community. It's a very close-knit community. And we're very happy here. An increased sense of well-being, I suppose.
Being able to live in a rural, affordable home has allowed me to return to the village I grew up in, live close to family members, and also allowed me to help and contribute to my local community.
I want to thank English Rural Affordable Housing. I love my home, I love my village, and I love being near my family. Thank you for making it possible.
So yeah, the short video there, which is fantastic. English Rural aren't the only housing association who develop across Kent, but certainly I'm not sure what we'd do without them, because they provide so many lovely homes across Kent, and yeah, are always interested and keen to get started on these very small, quite difficult sites to develop. I just wanted to end with a quote that's in the guide, which I think is quite nice. It's a quote from Princess Anne, who says, "Small-scale affordable rural housing can help to rebalance communities, keeping families together whilst providing a boost for local services." And that's really it from me. So I'm hoping that there will be some questions that we can answer. I'm not sure what's been going on in the chat, but perhaps we can have a look at that now, or I can see there's a raised hand as well. Chris Fribbins.
Hi, maybe I found the raised hand. I'm used to Zoom like most of us are now. As I say, I think we're in the Medway towns. Our villages are part of the Medway community, and we're villages on the Hoop Peninsula. And we've felt, well, residents in particular, have felt very much that development has been forced on them of houses, and they've not seen the benefit of a local affordable housing. I'm sure it's an element that could be solved, but we always come across the barrier is getting started, engaging a partner who understands the process and actually starts maybe negotiating with some of these developers about the affordable housing that has been allocated under Section 106 could easily be available to some of our local people. But it's getting to that first step of engaging somebody with the knowledge to carry it forward. I'm sure it would be supported by a number of people, and be supported by the parish council, but it just looks a huge mountain to climb when you look through the fact sheets. The idea of actually starting off the process is, yes, it's long, yes, it's complicated, it involves companies and legal agreements and things like that. And we really just need somebody to steer us, a partner, really, to get things moving, because it would be supported.
If I can just take the first part of that in terms of the Section 106 negotiation, it is possible for parts of your market development to have affordable housing for local people secured through the Section 106 agreement. And that's really something that normally the planning officer will be involved in. So that's sort of a good place to start. In terms of the whole process, if you were trying to do something yourselves, my advice would be to seek partnership with a housing association. I don't know if anyone else on the panel has got anything to add to that.
Yes, I was going to say hello, Chris. Yes, it can seem daunting. I'm from English Rural. I'm also chair of the Rural Housing Enabler steering group, and it is the Rural Housing Enabler project that starts these very schemes off by carrying out the housing needs surveys, and they are there to support parish councils and community groups and community land trusts in starting these projects and seeing it right the way through. So I would urge anyone who is interested in starting, you won't be alone, you'll get lots of support, and let's say the first port of call should be the Rural Housing Enabler Project at Action with Communities in Rural Kent, and you'll receive all the advice and support that you might need.
I think Tessa will recall we did have a couple of housing surveys over the years, an early one and a later one, because we've adopted, we're in the process of adopting a neighbourhood plan. But we didn't get a lot of response from people because, must admit, a lot of our residents are anti-brick. They wouldn't want another house built if they had the chance. They like it as it is. They don't want it to change. But obviously the reality is that people do need housing, and quite a few of our youngsters are getting to the age where they're going to need something. It wouldn't be nice to be able to do something. So the development's happening. The 106 agreements for affordable housing is happening. We need that partner to carry it forward.
Okay, is there should we move on to the next question? Or there's a raised hand, Penelope. Just to say, Chris, we can get back to you in more detail as well after this. It's quite difficult with this number of people, but we've obviously got your raised hand and got your question.
Yeah, I think I think as Chris said, the housing needs surveys we did were to feed into your neighbourhood plans, weren't they? And so if you're looking at Section 106 sites, you're talking about a partnership to take that forward with you. But yeah, we can talk about that later, as you say.
Okay, so I can see a raised hand from Penelope.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to touch on a couple of the points that Chris has raised. Alison has been in touch with us, and she offers a great deal of help and advice, and it is useful. I've come to a slight stumbling point in that it talks about building on rural exception sites. And I'm afraid when we try to find those, it's difficult because most of the farmers are selling their land for a good deal of money, so they're not going to give us anything cheap. And the idea of building on other areas that wouldn't normally be built on is met with some resistance because local people actually don't want any more building. We already have a site about to go through planning for 214 houses and another one in progress actually being built for 36. So that's the first point, that Alison was very helpful, but I came to a halt when I tried to find people to suggest sites. The second point is that those two developments have both got affordable housing built into the applications. But what I understand has been experienced in the past is that often that tends to be reduced nearer the final completion time, i.e. we're at the first stage of the planning. When they sell that land to the next developer, the plans start to change. How do we actually enforce that?
Okay, so the first part of the question about the search for sites is really difficult, and I think it is becoming more difficult as the development on the edge of villages is increasing anyway. So in terms of looking for sites, if you have a housing needs survey already carried out by Action for Communities in Rural Kent, I know they certainly used to provide a service where they would also look for land. I don't know if that's still the case, Tessa?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, so we can help with a site search after the surveys, you know, found if there's a need or not. So yeah, that's still part of our service, helping with a site search. But that can include sort of doing a call for sites as well to see if there's any land involved, as well as a sort of more map-based search. I'm not sure where you're from, Penelope. Sorry, which parish you're from?
Minster in Thanet, not Minster on the Isle of Sheppey. Minster in Thanet. Okay. We have a housing need of about 7 or 8 for elderly people. But yes, I think the concern is people are saying, but we don't want any more building. And that's probably where I'm stumbling a bit.
Yeah, I think that's happening a lot more, as Sarah said, because of the bigger developments that are coming, you know, more frequently on the outside of the very big developments. And it's kind of doesn't help with a sort of anti-building, you know, and so when you're trying to bring an exception site scheme into play. But I mean, the point about the exception sites are that they are meeting the need for local people specifically, and they have to have a connection to the village to live in them. So that's the difference really between the affordable housing that might be provided on the bigger sites, and I suppose it's getting that message across.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing is about trying to secure what that is going to come for local people, and as I say, there are mechanisms that can happen. And you know, where a parish council or anybody in a village is commenting on a new application, I would always urge them to say that, you know, they want whatever affordable housing there is, and yes, it can be downgraded in terms of the percentage, but I mean, certainly in Tunbridge Wells, we're finding generally that the 40% affordable housing that we ask for is viable. But yes, it can be dampened down, but what housing is provided, you know, lobby for it to be for local people, because that is a possibility, and normally whichever housing association ends up taking the affordable housing is quite happy to open up to local people first.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just come in there, Sarah. Hello, Penelope. I'm from Sevenoaks District Council. Outside of this, I'm happy to share with you a mechanism that we've been using, which is using local lettings plans on larger development sites where you've got a housing need identified locally. You don't necessarily have to do a rural exception site to meet that need. You can use sort of private development sites, and if the local authority is amenable with support from what's come out of the housing needs survey in the parish council, you can earmark a certain number of units to meet the locally identified need, and it has a fairly similar effect to what a rural exception site would. But I'm happy to share with you what we've done in Sevenoaks to secure housing in that way.
Thank you. That would be very useful.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Liz. I've got Anne Davies.
There's a question in the chat as well, Sarah. Once we've heard from Anne.
Okay, should we hear from Anne first?
Yep.
Oh, hello. Yes. Well, with the amount of development that's being forced in rural areas anyway that are not exception sites, it's really very easy to understand why local people do not want even more building on rural exception sites, whether it's for affordable housing or not. And the planning environment as it is at the moment is very much a hindrance to people like yourselves that are trying to find these sites, because as you said, people have already had enough building and they really don't want any more. To me, and I'll have your views very happily, it seems that the problem really goes back to the basic planning process, whereby the land values are so high now, or the expectation of a high land value is so widespread. Developers are paying far too much for the land, which reduces the amount of affordable housing they are providing. And if the land prices were valued sensibly, then the exception sites wouldn't be needed. We could simply lobby to have a part of the main building development sites and make sure the affordable housing we need, especially housing for the elderly, which seems to be, certainly in this parish, neglected by the planning authorities over and over again. I mean, we've got 1,100 houses going up here. Over the whole site, we've only got 11% affordable housing, and we've got no accommodation for elderly people at all, which is disgraceful. And the land prices here are such that getting more land would meet huge local opposition, and the local farmers, landowners, expect far too much for the land anyway. So it really comes down, I think, to the way the land is valued. It used to be that you looked at what you needed to provide in terms of affordable housing and community facilities, look at what it costs, looked at what you were going to get for the sale of the house, and then worked out the land value from there, which seems a very sensible way of doing it. But now they seem to fix the land value, and the bit that's left at the bottom is the affordable housing, and whatever that is, it is. And it does seem that really we should be lobbying our local authority when local plans are made, lobbying the central government to try and sort this out, so that we don't actually have the dilemma that we're in at the moment and have this awful struggle in finding the sites we need.
Yeah,
Sorry,
just a couple of things there that I would say I absolutely agree with you that the local plan policies are key to this. If the local authority has got a strong local plan for its affordable housing and says what it needs and what it wants, its percentage, what type of affordable housing it wants, then that is the best starting point, because then the land values, eventually developers will begin to realise they've got to do this. And the land values will reflect that. I know that's really difficult now in the sort of position you're in. I'm not quite sure where your local authority is, but yeah, I absolutely agree in terms of the local plan policies are really important, and if you can get involved in the local plan policy making, then you should do so. Just very briefly on the elderly people. It's described in the guide about cross subsidy, and some of the beauty of a rural exception site can be that there can be some homes for sale as well that cross subsidize the affordable housing, and for example, like 2 or 3 bungalows that might really meet a need within your village can be sold at a reasonable price to cross subsidize some affordable housing for families. So I know it's hard with the rural exception sites to find the land, but that still seems to provide the best need for local communities. I don't know whether Liz's guide might be useful for this lady too, for Anne as well. Liz, yeah, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm happy to, if I send a copy into to Tessa or Rebecca, and then you know, we can share it out to to people who would like to see a copy of local lettings plans on general development sites, and yes, the whole idea of cross subsidy, and because housing need isn't, it's our use of terminology. Housing need isn't just about affordable housing need. Housing need can mean suitable housing, and suitable open market housing, as Sarah has described, can be bungalows for older people who currently live in a village, who want to downsize, who want to stay in the village, who want to stay where they've got all their local connections, support groups, interest groups, probably going to schools to hear children read, all the things that older people have the time and energy to do. They want to stay where they are, but there's no suitable housing for them to downsize into. So if you can have a scheme, a rural exception site scheme that also includes a number of open market homes for older people, and you can have, I know Alison's been involved in schemes where the initial marketing of open market properties is a priority is given to those with the local connection. So you keep that whole local influence. Sorry, I sort of jumped upon you there, Alison. I don't know if you wanted to comment.
That's fine. And I did want to comment and answer part of Anne's question. I mean, English Rural have been delivering affordable homes in villages for nearly 30 years, and traditionally rural exceptions sites were bought just for a multiple of agricultural value. I mean, obviously things have changed in the light of local authorities call for sites for their local plans. So even though a local landowner may not get his site allocated in the local plan, he has had his aspiration of value raised. But it's important that we do continue with the rural exception site policy, because it is the clear way to ensure that homes remain affordable for local people in perpetuity, and that is such an important part of what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, Liz touched on the cross subsidy, and yes, we have that ability now, which is good because it helps us incentivize local rural landowners to make small areas of land available for local needs, because we have that ability to include 1 or 2 open market properties, which we've tried as always being bungalows, because you're quite right, there is such a need for local people wanting to downsize. So what we're able to do is to provide some affordable rented and shared ownership homes for local people on lower incomes, and then perhaps 1 or 2 open market for those needing to downsize. And yes, finding a site at the right price and making that land available is hard, but it's still not impossible. And we're hoping that this guide will not only support communities and parish councils, but encourage landowners to come forward and talk to us all about making land available and the impact that can have on rural communities. I saw one of the questions in the chat box was to all the panel, saying, if we have one hope for this protocol, what would it be and what would the impact be? I mean, my hope is just to raise awareness of the benefits of local needs housing. We heard those residents talking, and there are hundreds of those all over Kent, who've had their lives changed by having an affordable home, and how important it is that we continue. So if the protocol raises awareness, offers support to communities, to parish councils, encourages landowners to put land forward, then that will be a brilliant outcome. And let's hope that it does.
So would that be your change, Alison? That would be your change one thing. Raise the profile.
To raise the profile, and also to educate, and because obviously with any rural affordable housing there is always local concerns. There are people who would prefer not to see any more new homes in their village, particularly as there is such a pressure from developers in rural communities now, and they do have concerns, and they are suspicious and of affordable homes coming in the village, what that might mean. Is it going to set a precedent? Will it open the floodgates? And I think what we want to do is to demonstrate that these schemes are small. They're, you know, the average size of a local needs scheme is eight homes. So, but the impact those eight homes can have can be immense. So, you know, it's just trying to reassure people that, you know, this is needed and not to fear it always. I mean, planning applications have to go through the normal process, but, you know, the objections sometimes are immense. So anything we can do, yeah, to raise awareness and educate would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Can I just add something to that, Sarah? And one of the things I wanted to say to add to the need for open market bungalows is a few years ago now I introduced, when we do the housing needs surveys, I introduced that to the surveys as standard, that we now look for the need for affordable housing, and we also look at the need for older people who want to downsize, maybe from open market homes, because that is always a need that comes up in villages, that older people need to downsize, more manageable homes, but they don't. The housing that is being built is not for that, you know, not that kind of housing that meets those needs. So we always include that now in the housing needs surveys, because as Alison said, the cross subsidy is important, and it meets another need for the village as well. And I think in answer to the question that Martin put to the panel, if we could change one thing, I think mine would really be that communities really start getting involved in providing the housing that they need for themselves, and they can really do this through the exception site, developments, and also you could do it through community-led housing, CLTs working in partnership with a housing association, which English Rural are doing else in a village in Dover area. So yeah, I think that would be mine, that communities really can see that they can get engaged and take a bit of control over the housing that is provided in their area for local people.
Yeah, mine too. I would ditto that if, on the question, definitely. More rural exceptions housing would be the way forward. It's the way forward for parishes, I believe. Shall we just move on quickly to the next question on income and housing needs registers? One of the problems with being able to maintain local people is the high cost of housing. In some parishes, house prices are pushing 400 to 500,000 for a 3-bed, but a number of people aren't eligible to be on the housing register due to the higher income and can never afford their own home in the parish, which leaves the affordable homes built not going to local people. Does the protocol help in any way with this, or is it down to councils to maybe revise the income levels that reflects the local area / parish, so that more local people are eligible and do get to stay in their parish? Yeah, it's a very difficult one, because every local authority housing register has a threshold, and if you have income or capital above a certain level, you can't go onto the register. I can only really speak for Tunbridge Wells in terms of we will look at people who come from the parishes to go onto the housing register with a higher level of income, if it means they can access a particular home that's going to be developed in their local area. So I think the protocol, it does, I mean, it touches on that in it, but I think really it's down to the parishes to inform their local authority about this discrepancy, especially if, as I say, if they know that there's particular development happening. Does anyone, Liz, have you got something to add?
I think it's worth contacting your local authority, because in Sevenoaks we recognised this as an issue, and it came out when we consulted on our allocations policy. So in Sevenoaks, we have a two-tier approach. There's the standard income limits that apply to general needs affordable housing, but then on rural exception sites, we have a specific income ceiling, which is much more generous because it recognises these opportunities are very few and far between. And often people living in the rural areas will be earning just above the income ceiling that would normally apply on the allocations policy. However, in order to keep local communities thriving and sustainable, the decision was made to have a separate income cap applying to rural exceptions, and that has worked well. It stood us in good stead. So, again, sort of happy to share that element of our allocations protocol, allocations policy, if others would be interested in seeing how we've done that.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Yeah, I think that would be really useful. I mean, normally there's a possibility some of the people may be able to afford shared ownership. The other form of tenure, which I've seen becoming more common in the villages recently, is rent to buy as well, where a family is able to rent the property for a period of time at a sub-market rent, with a view to buying it after a set period. That's a particular response from a housing association where that values are very high, and obviously coming out of COVID is a very difficult time for some people to get on the housing ladder. So the method would still be go through the Help to Buy agent. Having said that, if there's a particular development going up in your village, it's always worth finding out who the housing association is and seeing whether they're taking nominations directly for the low cost home ownership, or, as I say, if they may be doing rent to buy as well. I can't see any other questions in the chat, but I may be missing something. Does anyone else see anything on there? No.
I've got a message that says chat disabled.
Oh, I don't have that on mine.
I have it on mine.
Looks okay to me.
Does anybody else have a question where they might just want to raise their hand? That's Jennifer.
Yeah. How do you stop developers being cynical? We had a small development of what would have been 10 houses, and he split it in half. He applied for permission to build 5 houses and got it. Then he applied for permission to build another 5, didn't get it, but got permission for 4. But the upshot was that the 1 or 2 houses that should have been affordable never got built. This is about as cynical as it gets, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No, I mean, there still is that big fear from developers about affordable housing and what that means, and unfortunately that does mean sometimes that they will do anything to get out of it.
Yeah, but that makes a whole nonsense of the law. Yeah,
and it's a difficult one. Where I don't know where you are based, but there's normally policies within the local plan that will stop that happening, i.e. that the whole site needs to be counted as one if it's next to each other.
So they were, not only were they next to one another, one was the car park of the rural industry, and then it was the building itself. It was an absolutely cynical. It was a deliberate planning skirt to get around the law. And if they're going to do that and they're going to get away with it, then can you wonder that local communities don't want development? Because where you would have thought that, well, maybe we would have got 1 or 2 affordable houses for people who live in the village and would like to put their name up for those, or even to put their name down as a possible purchaser of an affordable house, it's absolute nonsense. So you can't be surprised at the mention of development on small scale is instant refusal by the people. We don't want it because the village gets nothing from it.
I think it was just pointed out previously that the taking control by local people, perhaps ensuring that there is a housing needs study done, a very detailed affordable housing needs study done, to support rural exception housing. That would be my advice. I am very conscious of time though. I think Anne Davies has got hand raised, and then we probably have to end it there. Anne's on mute. Oh, no, she's not now.
Sorry. Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, I mean, Jennifer's got a really good point there, and we've experienced this as well, is where there is no control over the cumulative impact of several small developments, each of which contribute to the marking houses. Because they're so small, they do not contribute towards the provision of open space, any community facilities or affordable housing, nor is a proper assessment made of the impact of the increased traffic or the impact on local ecology or anything. And this again comes back to a local plan failure, which forces areas as a whole to be taken into account when judging the merits or otherwise of small developers, and putting in place mechanisms whereby the overall need for affordable housing, among other things, is cumulatively met. We have several, between 8 and 10 houses. They all come under the threshold for Section 106 agreements, and under the threshold for local housing. So things are going to be split up. Developers are not silly. They will consult with the community only as far as they have to get planning permission. But I think the key here, again, it comes back to your district planning authority, and the need to take into account the cumulative effect of these small developments really does need to be pushed, because the developers will find a way out of people like us having any say in what they do if they possibly can. So Jennifer's quite right to be worried, and we've suffered exactly the same thing. So my full sympathies go to her.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody who's contributed today. I would end on the same note as I answered the last question, in terms of, please use the protocol, have a read. It's not a long read, so hopefully you might find some things in there where you may feel as a community you can come together and take some control. As I think there's a few things that we're going to add to the recording, is it, Rebecca?
We can send out some information, the stuff that Liz has agreed to share. We can send that out next week once we've got the link for the recording as well, so people can pick up any questions or information they might have missed.
Okay, so yeah, did anyone else on the panel want to say anything before we end?
I think, answering Martin's question about, what would be my one ask, I think it would be for landowners to come and talk to us. Don't see the parish or the local authority or the housing association as the opposition. Try and work with us, because a small scheme, a small element of their land can make a tremendous difference to a local community. And there are, through national planning policy guidance and own local policies, there is now scope to be perhaps a little bit more creative with rural exception sites, to get a scheme coming forward that that meets not only local needs, but perhaps something that the landowner's looking for. So so come and talk to us and see what can be achieved.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz. And anything else from any of the rest of the panel, or shall we close it there?
Can I just say one quick thing, just really going back to Jennifer and Anne's points about these developments. And again, I think this is something that the guide can raise awareness of, is that, we do a lot of lobbying, and communities can join this lobbying to try and ensure that the threshold for affordable housing in rural areas is lower than in other areas, the percentage point where affordable housing kicks in, as it were. And I do think, that communities getting involved through their parish councils or through community groups can challenge this sometimes and talk to their local authorities about local planning policy and ensuring that maybe there can be an affordable quota on small rural schemes. And that will help as well as rural exception sites.
Okay, I just noticed someone's raised their hand. We'll take that very quickly, Tracy, if you don't mind.
Hi, I was just going to comment. So I'm the Chief Executive of West Kent Housing. So we have worked to deliver rural sites quite a lot over the years, and I'm just encouraged to hear sort of the passion and enthusiasm amongst yourselves for trying to take this forward. So we are a local landlord. We are one of these people who will make the difference that you've been talking about. So more than happy to talk to you if you do have any sites that you think we might be able to help unlock.
Lovely.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, well, thank you ever so much everyone for coming today. Lovely to see you all virtually, and I do hope that you're able to take some time to look at the protocol, and if you've got any other questions you want to ask us, please do get in contact with us all. I'm pretty sure that all our contact details are on there. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Has everyone gone?
I don't know, let's have a look, have they? Or 15 I've got in my...
Still going.
Well done, Sarah, that was really good.
Yeah, well done, Sarah.
Good. Well done.
Was it clear enough?
Yeah, it was fine.
Okay, good.
It was very good.
Yeah, I thought some of the questions were quite awkward, but it's an awkward subject, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you did really well, and I think it was encouraging, and there were good questions. Oh, that's great. Let's hope they feel inspired to go back.
Yeah. So where does the protocol go now, Rebecca?
It's on the website. It's all ready to go. So it's there to the video. The Baroness's video is on there.